overheard my boyfriend humiliating me behind my back. I stood in the kitchen, slicing pie for the man who had just said, "She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable." I smiled like nothing was wrong. Nearly 2 years ago, at the most peculiar time, I met James at Trader Joe's. I was picking up some goods when I overheard the manager berating a man for parking in the wrong area or something. The manager was being a complete jerk about it, pointing and getting red-faced in front of everyone. James, the man, simply stood there, looking ashamed. To be honest, I have no idea what possessed me, but I intervened and said something like, "Maybe we should all just take a breather. The parking signs are confusing." The manager gave me a fierce look but moved away. As we were checking out, James asked if he could buy me coffee as a thank you, because he seemed so relieved. We clicked right away. He was tall, personable, and had a crooked smile that made me feel really good. He texted me good morning every day, listened to me when I spoke, or at least appeared to, and recalled small details. I was falling hard by the third date. My dad, in particular, was always very supportive of me. After I graduated from college and was figuring out my work, they helped me find an apartment. Dad also assisted me with some other bills and my car payment. They maintained that they wanted to assist me in getting back on my feet, but I always felt a little bad about it. About 8 months into our relationship, James moved in with me. Although it appeared quick, it made sense because his roommate situation had deteriorated. My folks were cautiously hopeful. He immediately won Mom over, although it took him longer. Dad finally started to warm up to James to receive Dad's final blessing. They even played golf together a couple of times. It was all so good until it wasn't. James's parents began visiting more frequently about 6 months ago. They would visit for Sunday brunch or dinner because they lived about an hour away. Sarah, his mother, was constantly praising my place, my cooking, or anything else. Michael, his father, was more reserved but still courteous. I suppose they were all right, but there was always something strange about them, as if they were acting instead of being themselves. "You have such a warm atmosphere here. It's been so long since we felt like a family." Sarah broke down in tears as she surveyed my living room during one of these visits, and Michael nodded in agreement, adding that their James is simply adorable and they hope we stay together for a very long time. I grinned and thanked them, but it felt strangely intense. In hindsight, I missed some of the signs. James would joke about how he'd hit the lottery with me, or make small remarks about my dad's generosity when we received something new for the flat. He would immediately text his folks. How, despite his frequent discussion of his ambitious aspirations, he never appeared to be actively seeking out better employment prospects. I became aware of trends. James would either be silent or shift the conversation whenever the subject of money or careers came up. While we were with my parents, James would get really engaged and start asking specific questions whenever my dad talked about his business. Later, when we were by ourselves, he would make small jabs about my dad being old money or traditional. He mumbled something about his ex having beauty but not stability after seeing a picture of her on Instagram one evening when we were browsing through it together. He simply kissed my forehead and stated, "I am the whole package," when I inquired what he meant. I recall feeling strange about it. I began to listen more intently. He would frequently be on his phone, grinning at texts, but he would put it face down if I were close. I once caught a peek of him emailing someone about how his financial situation was improving. He said it was just his friend discussing a new job when I questioned him. I wanted to think he was real. On 3 separate occasions, I heard brief phone conversations with his mother in which he stated things like, "It's comfortable," or "I'm just holding on for now." Every time he saw me, he would abruptly change the subject and start chatting loudly about plans for the weekend or what to eat for dinner. I began recording sporadic talks while he was on the phone after the 3rd time. Something seemed strange, and I needed to know if I was being overly suspicious or if my gut was correct. I realized it sounds really intrusive. I mostly didn't catch anything, simply having casual discussions with pals about plans or sports. The meal at his parents' residence followed. They invited us to join them for this elegant dinner, which included steaks, salads, champagne, and more. Sarah repeatedly touched my arm and expressed their happiness that James had found someone so encouraging since they had already met multiple times. It felt strange when Michael inquired about my dad's business, I volunteered to cut Sarah's baked pie after supper, leaving my phone on the dining room table. I headed to the kitchen, however. I began recording the voice memo before I left. I simply had to know. A partial wall divided the dining room from the kitchen, so I could hear them, but they couldn't see me. As I was cutting the pie, I heard James chuckle, the same laugh he makes when he wants to win someone over, even though his voice grew softer. I could still hear everything he said. She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable while I figure things out. On the knife, my hands froze. I may have briefly stopped breathing, he said. I'll stick around long enough to squeeze what I can out of her. Then I'll find someone worth showing off. I heard Michael's snort, as if he found it funny. Then came the quieter but unmistakable words of Sarah. Just don't get her pregnant. James once more. God, no. Can you imagine being tied to her family forever? Her dad is an arrogant old goat. If it wasn't for the money, I wouldn't even say hello to him. My entire body was on fire as I stood there with the knife. I wanted to hurl something, yell, or leave and never return. However, I continued to carve the pie instead, slice by slice, triangles that are perfect. I can't even recall considering it. I just completed it, grinning. I returned to the dining room with dishes in hand. After putting the pie down and giving them each a slice, I took a seat in my chair. James kissed my cheek and wrapped his arm around me. I didn't recoil. I simply asked Sarah about her garden while grinning. The remainder of the night is a haze. I recall kissing James in the vehicle on the way home, helping to clean up, and laughing at their jokes before we departed. I recall taking my phone off the table. He kicked off his shoes and flopped on the couch as if nothing had happened as I opened the door to our apartment, the one my parents were paying for because it was to him. That evening, I refrained from confronting him, or the following day. I simply observed him. I observed how, when he believed I wasn't looking, he would check my dad's social media sites. I noticed that any time our fridge was running low, he would recommend that we go see my parents. I noticed that when my dad was around, he would bring up his college loans. A week went by. I didn't get much sleep. I kept playing the recording again because I thought I might have misheard or misinterpreted it. However, no. His words were very clear. She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable. I'll find someone worth showing off. I stopped eating a lot, ceased speaking unless absolutely necessary. I would shut myself in the restroom and simply sit on the floor, attempting to think of something to do. James was aware that something was wrong, but he appeared irritated rather than worried. He kept asking if I was being dramatic or if I was on my period. At last, Mom made the breakthrough one afternoon when James was out with friends. She dropped by without warning, took one look at me, and sat me down at the kitchen table. She looked into my eyes and said, "What's going on with you and James? Is he behaving normally?" I wasn't in tears. I had stopped sobbing. All I felt was emptiness. I said, "Do you want to hear it?" "Yes," she replied. "Of course. Just don't interrupt." "Okay." I took out my phone, launched the voice memo app, and pressed the play button. James's voice filled the kitchen as we sat in stillness. She's convenient. Her dad's money keeps me comfortable. Mum's expression turned blank, and when the recording got to arrogant old goat, she started to shake. She remained silent for what seemed like an eternity after it was over. Then she got up, went to the corridor, and picked up her coat. "Don't let him come back here tonight," she replied. I said, "Where are you going?" "To your father." "Wait here." After she went, my phone buzzed with a text from James. I sat by myself in the kitchen, joining the boys for drinks. BB returned late. Avoid waiting up. I didn't answer. Rather, I launched my laptop and began compiling a list. Initial update. I am so grateful to all of you for your encouraging remarks on my previous post. I didn't think this would blow out the way it did, since some of you requested updates. This is what transpired following the arrival of my parents. My dad has never been so silent in my life. He generally fills up the gaps by asking questions, making small conversation, or telling dad jokes. But that night, when he came through my door, he simply nodded, with her hand on his back as if to steady him. Mum was close behind him. I had something he needed to hear, Mum said as I took out my phone once more. I felt my stomach turn. There was a part of me that wanted to back off, say anything, and act like nothing was wrong because when that recording was played, everything would be different forever. Still, I pressed play. It was to watch my dad hear James's voice. I'm not even sure how to explain it. His face didn't change at all at first. While James laughed about how convenient I was, he simply gazed at my phone on the table. Something flickered in his eyes when James dubbed him a cocky old goat. I thought Dad might blow up, but he didn't. After the recording was over, he sat there for a while. Then he grabbed my hand from across the table. He wanted to know if I was all right. Not what I was going to do or how this occurred. To tell the truth, I didn't anticipate that inquiry. I hadn't given much thought to whether I was okay because I had been so preoccupied with the betrayal and my next course of action. And the response was, no, I wasn't. That's when I started crying a lot for the first time since listening to the tape. Dad just let me cry as he squeezed my hand. Mum's answer to everything is tea, which she made. Dad inquired about the recording's date of origin. Once I had finally calmed down, I informed him that a week had passed. As if that made sense, he nodded. Then he inquired as to James's current location. I looked at my phone. He sent 3 more texts. Getting a second chance, hello. Mike says, babe, don't wait up. So typical, so unaware. I informed Dad James that he would not return for hours since he was out drinking with buddies. At that point, Dad's attitude shifted. He inquired if I had my laptop after he straightened up in his chair. I picked it up off the couch, where I had left my to-do list open. He gave it a quick look and grinned a little. It turns out that our thoughts were similar. For the next 2 hours, we worked on our plan, specific actions, not only irate responses. Dad was meticulous, using his phone's notes app to create his own list. It was strange. Instead of the anger I had anticipated, I experienced a concentrated, composed approach to problem-solving that was strangely more passionate than any yelling. The apartment is the first item on the list. Dad was paying the rent and co-signed the contract. At my table, he made a call to the property management firm. He clarified that he had to sign a new lease in my name alone and end the existing one. Dad interrupted the leasing agent as she attempted to clarify that there would be costs and paperwork. He assured her, I'll pay whatever fees are necessary. I need this done immediately. He suggested that if it would help expedite things, he could visit the office first thing tomorrow morning. When she hesitated, all of a sudden, she was a lot more understanding. The automobile comes next. My automobile, which Dad helped buy, had been driven by James. Dad called again, this time to our insurance representative. He instantly withdrew James from my policy. After that, he went into his Progressive app and modified the payment details to originate from my account rather than his. He clarified that, although he would still assist me with the expense, the account had to be entirely in my name. Mom assisted me in compiling a list of everything that belonged to James in the flat, while Dad worked on the financial matters. There wasn't much. Hygiene, his gaming gear, and a few clothes. I owned most of the cookware and furniture, or we had purchased it together with funds from my parents. I had another memory. Olivia, James's sister, was employed by my dad's business about 6 months prior. She had been employed immediately following James's casual statement to my dad that his sister was seeking a new opportunity. As a favor to me, Dad had interviewed her and offered her a job. I was hesitant to mention it somehow. It felt petty on my laptop. However, Mum saw me typing and erasing something. Dad's face hardened when I eventually informed them about Olivia. Once more, he picked up his phone. Dad sent an email to HR, requesting them to evaluate Olivia's job as part of an impending restructuring. But he didn't terminate her right away because he's not that sort of person. He made it apparent that, although she shouldn't be let go without reason, if budget cuts were necessary, her job should be viewed as non-essential. When I put it like this, it seems heartless. But the truth is that Olivia had been relying on her relationship with Dad and me. She was, at best, mediocre at her job, frequently arrived late, and took long lunches. James was the only reason she hadn't already been placed on a performance plan. We proceeded to the final topic, the confrontation. At around midnight, Mum recommended that we wait until the morning. But Dad wanted to call James's parents at that time. I concurred. We all needed to be calm for that discussion, and I was tired. Dad insisted on staying the night. Even though he grudgingly agreed, Dad assisted me in changing the locks while Mom went home to fetch their overnight luggage. Fortunately, we only needed to reset the code using the apartment app, because our building had those electronic keypad locks. As we erased James's access, I felt lighter. That night, I gave my parents the bedroom. By sleeping on the couch, James and I had shared a bed, but I didn't want to sleep in it. My phone began to explode with texts at around 3:00 in the morning. The dark code isn't functioning. What the hell? Sophia, are you serious now? It's chilly. Let me in. Sophia, pick up the phone. I placed my phone on the coffee table face down and put it on mute. I slept soundly for the first time in a week. Dad prepared pancakes in the morning, as if it were any other Saturday. We spoke about the weather and checked our phones while eating at the kitchen table. It seemed unreal, like we were pretending to be normal. By 5 in the morning, James had finally stopped texting. I assumed he had crashed at a friend's house. Dad decided it was time to call James's parents at around 10:00. My stomach knotted up once more. Mum gave me a shoulder squeeze and assured me that I had done nothing wrong. It wasn't necessary for me to feel guilty. Dad prepared a FaceTime call on his phone. 3 rings later, Sarah's face came into view. She initially appeared perplexed, but when she realized who we were, she forced a cheerful smile. Michael was reading a newspaper in the background, as I could see. Sarah's greeting was upbeat until she noticed our faces. Her smile wavered as she summoned Michael over. He frowned a little as he joined her on television. Dad didn't waste time making small talk. He just played the recording, after asking if they wanted to hear anything. Fascinating. It was another to see their faces alter as they heard their own voices. Sarah quickly put her palm to her mouth. Michael scowled more deeply. The fact that James had been caught saying it did not appear to startle either of them. Sarah started making excuses as soon as the recording was over. It was just talk, she argued. James didn't mean any of it. They were just joking around. Michael made an effort to appear serious and disillusioned, as though this was also new to him. Dad interrupted them after they had been babbling for around 30 seconds. He explained everything in detail. They were taking James out of the flat lease. My car was taken away from him. The end of all financial assistance was imminent. The corporation was evaluating Olivia's job. Sarah's expression fell flat. With sad eyes, she turned to me and begged me to change my mind. Didn't you know how much James loved you? Weren't you planning a future together? Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes. I simply stared back at her. The woman who had laughed behind my back and grinned in front of me, who had warned her son against getting me pregnant, as it would make him a member of my family, who, believing me unworthy of her son, had sat at my table and consumed my meal. Leaning into the frame was Mum. Then she instructed Sarah to keep her mouth shut. Now nobody was grinning. "Goodbye," she said before they could answer. Dad hung up. For a while, the 3 of us sat in silence. Then a text from James buzzed through Dad's phone. Where had I gone? Why was he unable to enter the apartment? What on earth was happening? Dad wrote a reply. Sent it after showing it to me for approval. Sophia is an expert. The building management will pack your belongings and leave them with you. Never get in touch with her again. The following several hours were devoted to packing up James's belongings. Handling his belongings in light of what I now understood seemed odd. I used to sleep in his favorite hoodie while he was abroad. I got him this coffee mug for Christmas. The framed picture of us from our beach vacation last summer. Something about it felt tainted. When we heard shouts coming from outside, Mom and I had just completed taping up the final box. James was buzzing my apartment repeatedly from the front steps of the building when I peered out my second-floor window. His clothing was rumpled, his hair was disheveled, and he was red-faced from either booze or rage. He looked like hell. Dad went to peek out the window. James began shouting more loudly as soon as he saw him. Did Dad have the right to keep him locked out? He also called this place home. Dad simply shut the blinds and shook his head. After about 20 minutes, the humming ceased. James was sitting on the steps with his head in his hands as I looked through the blinds. There was a tiny foolish part of me that felt sorry for him. But then I realized, she's practical. I'm comfortable because of her dad's wealth. I'll find someone to brag about. As we had agreed, Dad got James's boxes into his car at about 4:00 p.m. and drove them to the building manager's office. I stayed in the apartment with Mum, bouncing at every sound. We hardly ate the pizza we ordered for supper. I had finally come to terms with the truth of what was happening. My life had been a lie for 2 years. After 8 minutes, the buzzer sounded once more. I looked at my phone's security camera footage. James had returned, and his appearance had gotten worse. I chose to answer the intercom this time. He pleaded with me to release him, his speech garbled. He urged that we speak. There had been a miscommunication. He became much more irate when I took a while to reply. Did I truly have more faith in my parents than in him? Did I really act like a daddy's girl? Was I really wasting 2 years on a pointless discussion? I inhaled deeply before speaking. He had called me convenient, and I informed him that he intended to take advantage of me before abandoning me for someone he could brag about, that he had laughed about it with his parents. A protracted hush ensued. Then his voice was entirely different. Abruptly, he sounded sober and calculating. He inquired as to whether I had been filming him, if I was aware that doing so without permission is prohibited in our state. I might face consequences if I realized that. I handed the phone to Dad. Then he made it very obvious to James that we would call the police if he didn't leave right now, that he was pestering me on security footage, that he needed to leave the premises in precisely 10 minutes. James began to yell once more, but Dad cut him off. Dad and I watched the video stream as Mom contacted building security. A few minutes later, James was confronted by 2 security officers. They eventually took him off the property after some argument and pointing. That night, we jumped at every noise. Mum stayed with me in my room, and Dad slept on the couch. I was half expecting to see James attempting to break in, so I kept checking the security feed. However, the night went by without incident. We completed the new lease at the property management office in the morning. The auto insurance was changed. My bank accounts were safe. I deleted James from my Amazon, Spotify, and Netflix accounts, and changed all of my passwords. One login at a time. It was like wiping him out of my digital life. It was verified by the property management that James had picked up his boxes. He had been warned by the security staff not to enter the building without my express consent. My parents assisted me in moving the furniture around, as though doing so would somehow make the memory of him in that room disappear. They had to return to their own life after spending one more night there. At the entrance, Mom gave me a deep embrace. Dad kissed my forehead and encouraged me to contact them whenever I wanted, day or night, even though he seemed to be trying to say something meaningful. Then I was by myself for the first time in nearly 2 years. I was truly alone. It seemed like the flat was too large, too silent. I moved around, touching objects as I tried to take back my own space, because sitting at the kitchen table felt too familiar. I ordered takeout and ate it on the living room floor. At midnight, my phone buzzed. I received a text from an unfamiliar number. It's not over yet. You've made a grave error. I recognized James. The first didn't answer. I just shut off my phone and blacklisted the number. I listened for footsteps that never arrived while I lay awake until morning. The most recent update, all right. So everything blew up precisely 2 weeks ago. And to be honest, I'm tired. The unidentified numbers, the consistent texts, the voicemails, the phony accounts, Instagram messages, it's like battling a persistent ghost. I discovered 17 missed calls from various numbers between 2:00 in the morning when I got up this morning and 6:00 in the morning. My block list now exceeds my contact list because I've blocked so many numbers. It's obvious that James continues to use such apps that use temporary numbers or borrow phones from pals. I initially listened to the voicemails in the hopes that he would offer an authentic apology. However, they continued to deteriorate. The first few were predictable. He apologized. It wasn't his intention. All he wanted was to win his folks over. Blah, blah, blah. And then they were irate. How could I harm him like this? Did I realize how much he was suffering from this? On the 4th day, they became manipulative. Do you recall when you were sick with the flu and I looked after you? Do you recall our beach trip? They now alternate between being terribly depressed and menacing. The jewel of yesterday. I've destroyed his life. I caused his sister to lose her job. His parents feel let down by him. He is essentially homeless. 20 minutes later, he still can't sleep because he misses me so much. He only wants to speak. Even stranger is the fact that I still catch myself on the verge of answering. For example, I have to physically put my phone down since my thumb is hovering over the keyboard. 2 years is a long time, sometimes. I miss the person I believed him to be before learning the truth. I then play the recording once more. Though I'm comfortable because of her dad's wealth, I'll find someone to brag about. Don't get her pregnant, please. Emily, a friend of mine, visited yesterday. I can't express how much I appreciate her checking in on me every couple of days. On my couch, we were browsing TikTok when my phone buzzed with a text from an unidentified number. She inquired as to what was happening, but I chose to ignore it. I hadn't yet shared the whole tale with any of our mutual acquaintances. I just mentioned how messy our breakup was with James. However, I chose to simply play the recording for Emily while we were sitting there. As she listened, I noticed a change in her expression, perplexity, next shock. Then she displayed a chilly rage that I had never seen in her. She remained silent for a while after it was over. My stomach dropped when she told me anything. 3 days prior, James had texted her to inquire if she had seen me, claiming that he was concerned because I was behaving erratically and had made up a wild tale about him. She wasn't sure what was going on, so her reaction had been ambiguous. Now, however, she realized. She showed me the thread after taking out her phone. It was worse than I had anticipated. He informed her that I was experiencing a breakdown of some sort, that it was being made possible by my parents, that despite his best efforts, he was unable to get in touch with me. He went so far as to say that perhaps they ought to organize an intervention. Reading it made me literally nauseous. His goal was to deceive my pals, to make me seem insane. Emily started warning others in our circle via text right away. I checked my email while she was working on that, and I also saw messages from him that were from a few days ago. I hadn't considered checking my email because I had been so preoccupied with blocking him on my phone. Pictures of us together, screenshots of previous affectionate messages I'd written to him, and even a video from last Christmas showing me opening the necklace he got me and beaming were all attached to some of the emails. He seemed to be saying, "Look how good we were together. Look what you're throwing away," which was akin to emotional blackmail. I changed my email filters so that everything from him would go straight to the trash and erase them all. After Emily left that evening, I had a hard time falling asleep. I jumped at every sound. I repeatedly made sure my door was locked. I began going through our old texts at around 2:00 in the morning, searching for clues I could have missed. There were a lot of remarks on my dad's company, inquiries concerning my trust fund, and recommendations that I asked my parents for items he might like. What had caused my blindness? When I woke up the following morning, I heard someone knocking on my neighbor's door rather than mine. James was standing there, looking surprisingly put together in a button-down shirt. I had purchased him for his birthday when I peered through my peephole. He had a bag from my favorite bakery and coffee in his hands. Ethan, my neighbor, opened his door with a perplexed expression. James was saying something about surprising me and forgetting his key, but I couldn't hear everything. Fortunately, Ethan is naturally suspicious. "Why didn't James just call me?" he inquired. James stumbled over his desire for it to be a surprise. Ethan closed his door after saying he would first check with me. About a minute later, Ethan texted me to ask if he should let a man named James in. I quickly replied back, "Absolutely not," explaining that we had broken up and he wasn't welcome. Ethan gave a thumbs up in response. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan return outside and adamantly tell James that I didn't want to see him. James's expression shifted. The phony, agreeable smile vanished in an instant. His voice grew louder as he attempted to protest. Ethan, who is about 6 and exercises regularly, simply crossed his arms and looked down at James until he gave up and walked away. I sent Ethan a thank you text message that contained roughly 15 exclamation points. James gave me bad vibes, he said, adding that I should let him know if I needed anything. Make a note to yourself to properly thank Ethan by baking him some cookies. My buzzer rang that afternoon while I was on a Zoom call for work. I looked at the video stream on my phone since the building has a camera system. James's mother, Sarah, was waiting there with what appeared to be a gift basket. I chose to disregard it. It rang once more 5 minutes later, and once more, and once more. I finally hit the speak button and inquired about her desires. She stated she only wanted to converse, woman to woman, and her voice was sickeningly pleasant, that a horrible miscommunication had occurred. James was devastated. Couldn't I give him an opportunity to clarify? I informed her that the recording contained all the information I required. She changed her strategy right away when she inquired if I understood that it was against the law in our state to record someone without their knowledge. Her voice became stern, that if they so desired, they might file charges. It nearly made me chuckle. I encouraged her to give it a shot. They asked me to supper at their residence. where the recording was made. I hadn't used it for blackmail or shared it with the public. I had merely performed it for my parents and a few close friends to justify my breakup. After 10 more minutes of her standing there, I hung up and watched her walk away from the gift basket by the door via the security stream. Later, I received an SMS from the building manager informing me that an abandoned parcel had been taken out of my doorstep. I asked them to dispose of it after thanking them. My dad called to see how I was doing that night. Although he makes an effort to be informal, I can tell he's anxious. That day, he said James had arrived at his office and asked to talk to him. He created a commotion in the foyer, yelling that my dad had destroyed his life and turned me against him before security let him out. I felt awful. My dad's business was now being impacted by this. However, he reassured me that security had taken care of it and that I shouldn't be concerned. I could still sense the strain in his voice, though this was getting worse in ways that none of us had anticipated. I made the decision to leave the apartment on Saturday. I needed some fresh air because I had been essentially hiding inside for days. I walked to a little coffee shop about 3 blocks away, sat down at a table in the corner, and spent an hour trying to feel normal while reading. The sense that you just know someone is watching you came on while I was halfway through my cappuccino. James's sister, Olivia, was standing by the counter, staring at me as I looked up. When our gazes locked, I briefly feared she may approach and cause a commotion. Rather, she simply walked away after giving me this icy stare. I waited for another 15 minutes, but I was unable to concentrate on my book since my hands were trembling so much. I took a different path home when I eventually left, always checking my back. I still felt like I had to hide, even though it was absurd that I was at the wrong party here. My mother was waiting for me in the foyer when I returned to my flat. She had brought dinner and groceries because she wanted to see how I was doing in person. I needed to avoid talking about James, so we spent the evening watching Netflix. She slept on the couch while she was there. My phone started exploding once more at midnight. More unidentified figures. Additional texts that range from angry to apologetic. I turned it off and tried to fall asleep. I was having coffee with Mom in the morning when I heard a knock on my door. It's pounding, not knocking, as if they were attempting to dismantle it. I looked through the peephole and saw James, looking angry and unkempt. He was calling my name, insisting that I open the door, and claiming to be aware that I was inside. As I stood there staring at him through the peephole, my mother promptly contacted building security officers. He began kicking the door, and I jumped every time he did so. I spoke up and urged him to go since security was coming. He chuckled, in fact. I laughed. He stated that all he wanted to do was converse, that he could explain everything if I would just give him 5 minutes of my time. I inquired as to what needed to be explained. Did he say those things and then deny it? A pause occurred. Then the beating continued. He wasn't trying to hide it. All he was upset about was getting caught. A few minutes later, security showed up. 2 men who appeared to prefer being somewhere else. They were instructing James to go, and I could hear it. There was some shouting and scuffling in the corridor. I stood in the kitchen with my mum, listening, not talking. At last, there was silence. The security staff texted me to let me know that they had taken him out of the building and contacted the police because he had grown violent when the guards attempted to escort him out. He apparently shoved one of them. Mom and I simply exchanged glances. This was becoming risky. She recommended that I stay with them for a bit, but in some ways, that felt like giving him the advantage. I called this place home. The last thing I wanted was to be chased out of it. Rather, I did what I ought to have done days ago. I submitted a restraining order application. The procedure was very simple. I have witness accounts, emails, texts, and surveillance footage of several occurrences for added security. Dad came over the next day to install one of those Ring doorbell cameras, while Mom spent another night. To be honest, I was as concerned as they were. I didn't think I knew this James, or perhaps it was, and I had simply never seen it before. Silently, 4 days went by, no texts, no phone calls, no unannounced guests. I began to feel as though it might be over and to relax a little. I did the typical everyday things, like going to work and stopping at the grocery shop on the way home. I even went out to dinner with Emily and a few other friends, but I took care to keep our destination a secret on social media. Then, when I got home yesterday, I discovered a manila package hidden beneath my door. No name, no address, a blank envelope, that is. There was a 12-page handwritten letter from James. Inside that detailed all the things he said he loved about me, all the memories he treasured, and all the plans he had for our future. The final page was different. The penmanship became more sloppy and forceful. He wrote that he would make sure no one wanted me if he couldn't have me. Worried if they leaked the videos he had of me would be embarrassing. That he was aware of potentially troublesome information regarding my dad's business. Reading it made me ill. The threat itself was a violation. Even if there were no incriminating videos, we had never produced any, and he most likely made up or misinterpreted any information he believed he had regarding my dad's business. Nevertheless, the fact that he would use threats. I gave my father a call, then the police. They saw the letter as proof of a violation of the restraining order. The cop who arrived appeared disinterested, as if this were normal. However, she duly accepted my story and promised to investigate. I didn't think much would occur. I noticed a noise coming from my balcony at about 3:00 in the morning. The balcony of my second-floor apartment has a fire escape connection. I listened and froze. Another sound, as if the sliding door were being tested. Whispering into the phone, I dialed 911. I was instructed by the dispatcher to lock myself in the restroom until the officers arrived. With my heart thumping so hard I could feel it in my throat, I took my phone and keys and followed her instructions. I heard my sliding door open via the bathroom door in my living room. Footsteps. My name being softly called, James. I don't recall much of the subsequent events. The police showed up in a flash. Shouting was heard. A crash, like someone knocking over furniture. I was so shaken that I could not stand when they knocked on the restroom door to let me know it was safe to leave. James had been taken into custody on charges of resisting arrest, breaking and entering, and violating the restraining order. He seemed drunk, according to one of the police, and had become aggressive when they attempted to handcuff him. My coffee table had been knocked over by him, shattering the glass top and a number of framed pictures. I stayed at my parents' place for the remainder of the night. James was released on bail, but he was required to wear an ankle monitor and maintain a minimum of 500 feet from me, my apartment, and my place of employment, according to a call I received in the morning. He would be imprisoned again right away if he broke these conditions. I stayed in my childhood bedroom after that conversation and eventually started crying, not sweet tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that left me feeling drained. Mom entered and simply embraced me as I sobbed. Mom asked me what I wanted to do after I had finally calmed down. Was it my desire to relocate to a new apartment? Did I wish to file more charges? I had no responses. I haven't yet. I'm writing this from my parents' guest room, which is filled with high school awards and plush toys from my early years. I feel like an angry lady who has been pushed too far and a scared little kid all at once. This afternoon, the police called to report that James had removed his ankle monitor in violation of the conditions of his parole. They are searching for him, but they haven't found him yet. As a precaution, they suggested that I remain somewhere he wouldn't think to check. Thus, that is the current situation. My ex-boyfriend broke into my apartment and threatened to leak fake videos of me after I found out he was using me for my dad's money. So I'm hiding in my parents' house while the police look for him. I can't get that moment in the kitchen out of my head, him laughing about how handy I was, how I presented dessert, grinned, and cut the pie as if nothing had gone wrong. I regret not confronting him right away. I regret not throwing the pie at him and leaving. I regret ever having met him. However, it's too late to make wishes now. All I have to do now is figure out what comes next.